Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world today. I want you to stop for a moment and really think about your life. How many times have you felt stuck, longing for a breakthrough, a miracle, or a change that seems impossible? Today, we are going to talk about something so powerful, so supernatural, that it can completely transform the way you live, the way you think, and the way you experience every moment. Today's message is about the power of prayer. Many people misunderstand prayer. Some see it as sending God to do their errands. Some think it's asking God to run their life for them. Others treat it as trying to convince heaven to agree with their will. But prayer is far greater than that. Prayer is the place where your heart, your mind, and your will align with the purposes of heaven. Prayer prepares you to carry the blessings, the responsibilities, and the assignments that God has already set aside for your life. It equips you to receive what only heaven can release. And I want you to stay with me till the very end. Watch carefully, listen closely, open your heart fully, because God is ready to move in your life, but He is waiting for one thing: your prayer. And when you understand this truth, your life will never be the same again. What prayer really is: aligning with God's will. Prayer is not about convincing God to agree with your plans, your desires, or your timeline. Prayer is the process of bringing your mind, your heart, and your will into alignment with the purpose of heaven. Many people approach prayer like a shopping list, telling God what they want, when they want it, and how they want it delivered. But prayer is not about bending heaven to your will. Prayer is about bending your will to heaven's agenda. When you truly understand prayer, you stop trying to control outcomes and you start seeking divine direction. Prayer is where you exchange your weakness for God's strength, your confusion for His wisdom, and your fear for His authority. Prayer is the place where your character is shaped, where your thinking is corrected, and where your spirit is empowered. True prayer changes you before it changes your situation. It prepares you to carry the blessings, the responsibilities, and the assignments that God has already prepared for your life. Prayer releases supernatural power into your life. Prayer is the channel through which the invisible power of God becomes visible in your daily life. Heaven operates by spiritual laws, and one of the greatest laws is that God responds to faith expressed through prayer. When you pray, you are not performing a religious ritual. You are activating divine resources that already exist on your behalf. There is power stored in heaven that is waiting for a voice on earth to release it. When you pray, strength is released into your weakness, direction is released into your confusion, and favor is released into your circumstances. Prayer invites God's intervention into areas where human ability has reached its limit. Many people struggle because they are trying to fight spiritual battles with natural strength. Prayer pulls heaven into your situation and pushes darkness back. It releases wisdom for decisions, peace in chaos, provision in lack, and healing in broken places. Prayer is where natural limitations are confronted by supernatural authority and where ordinary lives begin to experience extraordinary results. Prayer unlocks heaven and shuts the gates of hell. Prayer is the spiritual authority given to humanity to access heaven's resources and restrict the influence of darkness on earth. Heaven is not locked because God is unwilling. Heaven is waiting for agreement from earth through prayer. When you pray according to God's will, you are giving heaven legal permission to move in your situation. Prayer opens doors of favor, wisdom, protection, and divine opportunity that no human effort can create. At the same time, prayer closes doors that the enemy tries to use to bring destruction, confusion, fear, and division. Many people live under spiritual pressure because they do not understand the authority they carry in prayer. Darkness thrives where prayer is absent, but when a believer prays with faith and understanding, spiritual atmospheres change. Prayer can stop attacks before they grow, break strongholds that have existed for years, and establish God's order where chaos once ruled. Prayer is not begging God. Prayer is enforcing what heaven has already decided and establishing divine rule in earthly situations. The danger of living a prayerless life. A life without prayer slowly disconnects you from the source of your strength, your wisdom, and your direction. When prayer disappears, people begin to depend only on their intelligence, their emotions, and their limited understanding. A prayerless life may look strong on the outside, but it is weak in the spirit. Without prayer, fear grows stronger, temptation becomes harder to resist, and confusion begins to control decisions. The enemy does not fear talent, education, or position. The enemy fears a believer who knows how to pray. When prayer is missing, spiritual sensitivity becomes dull, and people begin to normalize things God never designed for them to carry. Families begin to fracture, purpose becomes unclear, and peace becomes rare. A prayerless believer often lives in cycles of struggle, constantly reacting to problems instead of having authority over them. Prayer is not optional for survival in spiritual warfare. When you remove prayer from your life, you remove the covering, the guidance, and the power that keeps you stable in seasons of pressure and uncertainty. Prayer strengthens families, churches, and nations. Prayer is the foundation that holds people together when pressure, conflict, and uncertainty try to tear them apart. When prayer exists in a family, unity becomes stronger than disagreement, and love becomes stronger than pride. A family that prays invites God into their decisions, their struggles, and their future. Without prayer, families begin to rely only on emotions, and emotions change with circumstances. Prayer builds spiritual covering over homes, protecting hearts and guiding relationships. The same is true for churches. A church that prays operates with spiritual authority, wisdom, and unity of purpose. When prayer is missing, churches become weak, distracted, and divided. Nations are also affected by the prayer life of their people. History shows that when people pray, God releases guidance, protection, and stability over societies. Prayer shapes the moral strength and spiritual direction of communities. Prayer is not just personal communication with God, it is spiritual responsibility. When people pray together, they build strength that influences generations and establishes environments where purpose and righteousness can grow. Prayer activates the authority God has given you. Prayer is the expression of the authority God has already placed inside you. Many believers are waiting for God to give them power, not realizing that power has already been given, and prayer is how it is released. God has given you His Word, His name, and His Spirit so you can exercise dominion in spiritual matters. Authority is useless if it is never used. Prayer is where you speak heaven's will into earthly situations. When you pray with understanding, you are not speaking from weakness. You are speaking from spiritual position. Heaven responds to agreement with God's Word. Prayer allows you to confront fear, resist darkness, and establish God's order in your life. When you neglect prayer, you leave authority unused. But when you pray, you begin to operate as someone who understands their spiritual position and responsibility. Stop waiting on God. God is waiting on you to pray. Many people spend their lives asking when God will move, when God will change things, or when God will answer, without realizing that heaven often waits for the invitation of prayer. God has already released promises, power, and provision, but prayer is the connection point that allows those things to manifest in your life. When you do not pray, you delay what heaven is ready to release. Prayer is how you take initiative in the spiritual realm. God designed prayer so that humanity would participate in His plans on earth. When you pray, you show faith, dependence, and agreement with God's purpose. Waiting without prayer produces frustration, but waiting while praying produces preparation and alignment. Prayer shifts you from being passive to becoming spiritually active and engaged with God's will. Pray boldly. Ask God for the impossible. Prayer was never designed to be small, safe, or limited to what you think you can achieve on your own. Prayer is where you bring God-sized requests, not human-sized requests. Many people pray based on fear of disappointment, but faith prays based on the nature of God. God is not intimidated by impossible situations, and He is not restricted by natural laws. When you pray boldly, you are showing trust in God's power, not confidence in your ability. Ask for healing where doctors see no solution. Ask for restoration where relationships seem beyond repair. Ask for provision where resources seem finished. Bold prayer reflects a heart that believes God is unlimited and willing to move in ways that exceed human expectation. Understanding who you are talking to when you pray. When you pray, you are not speaking to a man, a president, or a billionaire. You are speaking to the Creator of heaven and earth, the one who holds galaxies in His hands and calls stars by name. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, the gold of the universe, and the power over life and death. Understanding who you are talking to changes the way you pray. Your requests are not trivial, and no situation is too great for Him. You speak with authority because you are addressing the Almighty God, whose power is infinite and whose promises are unchanging. Prayer becomes bold, confident, and fearless when you realize the greatness of your audience. Consistent prayer brings breakthrough, victory, and transformation. Prayer is not a one-time effort or a last resort. It is a lifestyle that transforms ordinary lives into extraordinary testimonies. Consistent prayer builds spiritual muscles, strengthens faith, and prepares you for divine opportunities. It shifts circumstances, changes hearts, and releases blessings that cannot be earned by human effort. When you pray regularly, you walk in alignment with God's will, resist the schemes of the enemy, and activate heaven's power in your life. Breakthrough comes to those who refuse to give up. Victory is secured for those who persist, and transformation occurs for those who remain faithful in their prayer life. As we come to the end of this message, let us remember the truth. Prayer is not optional. It is essential. It is the power that unlocks heaven, shuts the gates of hell, strengthens families, fortifies churches, and transforms nations. Prayer releases the supernatural authority God has given you. Prayer is not about convincing God to move. Prayer is about stepping into your spiritual authority and aligning your life with the purposes of heaven. When you pray boldly, consistently, and with faith, you activate miracles in your life. You speak to the Creator of heaven and earth, the one whose power is infinite and whose promises never fail. The breakthrough you are waiting for, the healing you need, the wisdom you seek, the peace your heart longs for, they are all available through prayer. But it is up to you to step into that power. Stop waiting for God to act outside of your prayers. Take the initiative. Pray. Persist. Ask for the impossible. Stand firm in faith, because your consistent prayer will bring victory, transformation, and supernatural results into your life. Thank you for joining us today on Dr. Myles Munroe Teachings. If this message has stirred your heart and reminded you of the incredible power you carry through prayer, subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you never miss a word of truth. Share this video with someone who needs a breakthrough today, and leave a comment below telling us what impossible thing you are boldly praying for this week. Remember, prayer is power, and when you pray, nothing is impossible.